All right.
Okay, we have the advanced campers. And incidentally, there's something I just want to say before we even start on this. The very highest scorer entering this camp this year, the very highest scorer entering the camp this year, last year was a student of Mrs. Kraft in the Junior Patriots room.
Oh.
She is doing a terrific job, and all her helpers are also. Too numerous to mention, and I don't even know who's who on all that. But it wasn't that it was an unusually high score. We've had people come in with higher scores, but it was the highest one here this year. So, Andrew Affleck.
Congratulations. You guys just stay up. Stay up. We'll wait. We'll acknowledge all of you. Just turn around and.
Okay, then Jacob Brom.
Jacob Brown. Congratulations.
Recipes, by the way, are in alphabetical.
Oh, you can stay up. You can stay up. We'll just.
Yeah, just stay up. You have to have a line up. Maybe it gets.
Okay, and Kay Clark.
Kay Clark. By the way, I just want to mention something on Jacob. He went out with the highest score of the advance, well, of anybody. But
All right.
okay, now we've got Vanessa Gill.
And by the way, first time camper. She was in the advanced class, first time to camp. I think the homeschooling has just a little bit to do with it.
Okay, Cecilia Gilbert.
Another first-time camper.
Dominic Gerard. Madeline Gerard.
You can stay up. We'll get a picture of all the smart people.
Sarah Moon.
Well, you're all smart. Sarah Moon. All right. These are your advanced campers.
We started out with 10, but I think, well, I'm not sure, I know some people left for various reasons. Yeah.
Back up against
Is
the glass,
Luke,
please.
Duffley,
Luke Duffley. No, he went home Thursday with, I had another camp to go to. Okay, what else we have there?
well, the next thing is the most improved.
Most improved.
The greatest gain between the entrance score, and the entrance test was just a little 3-page bubble test. And that gave us something to go on. The exit test started with that very same test, correctly relabeled exit by changing the front page. And then there was another add-on test to cover the material from a little different ground and add some other ideas and so on in. And then for the 10, well, or 8 advanced campers, they had a special sheet of questions from the people who provided questions or whatever.
So these are the most improved.
Yes, and we're working our way up, so
Okay, so the first.
Daniel
Hazelrig.
Yep. And Sebastian.
Where are you, Sebastian? Uh-oh. Okay, we'll put this aside. Somebody go find Sebastian. We didn't fall asleep. And then we have
Zach
Mercado.
Oh, okay. Lydia Black.
Lydia Black.
That's a
it's also Lydia's. Lydia was at the homeschool show in Worcester, the Mass Hope, this past April, and she kept on coming by the table, and we have a drawing for a free week. And I hope I win. And I said, you know what? We're going to have you anyway. Forget the drawing. You're coming to camp. So, okay. Oh.
Campbell Egan.
Campbell Egan.
That's 30 points gained.
Extended.
And Marcus Kraft.
Marcus.
32 points gained.
Hey, he's paying attention to his grandparents, I think.
Amen.
And
Levi Caverly.
Caverly.
That is 34 points, the highest of the high.
You want yours, right? Where were you? Oh, I had to write the newspaper. Oh, okay. You had a good excuse. So let's give.
For the 34 and 30, anyway, for the top couple, we have some books that were set aside for that purpose by Chris Ann Hall.
Chris Ann Hall. Oh, okay.
Yes,
Well, let's
and then there are also some single book awards.
get them out. Which
They're
right here.
Oh,
Which ones do go to them?
okay. There's the singles are out first. Just set those aside.
That's for Junior, okay.
Well,
The Roots of Liberty.
yeah. So a
Okay.
pile of these, and by the way, it's not even just books. There's one of those tapes of her
So who are
big seminars.
who are the top two?
The top two, yeah. So that's Levi and actually we have sort of a problem because I think some of them may have scored the same.
Want to flip a coin?
There's point gain put on there. Somewhere there's a plus with a 34, 32,
Okay.
30, 28, whatever.
So who's the second?
I don't know. I didn't have time to write it down. Well, actually, maybe, wait a minute, maybe I
No, you're going to read that, and we're going to be testing on all that. 24 points. Make sure.
Actually, it would be Marcus and Levi.
Levi, okay, excellent.
And then as far as the rest of the tests, let me just pull out some blank ones here. So it's harder when you don't have one. These are in more or less alphabetical order. Oh,
You just come up and get your tested up, make things a little easier.
yeah,
I'll stand here and then you can,
wait, oh,
just
Yeah,
stand your
okay.
feet up and then pass it to me and we'll get it to you.
okay, you want to call out the names so they know who's coming before you do it. Caitlin Affleck.
Okay, Caitlin Affleck.
Actually, on these, you could probably just hold a pause. These are, varying scores and so on.
Yeah, so, okay,
So just at the
Jordan
end-
Britt. Jordan Britt, there we go. Come on up.
And I
Like that
said
bow tie.
more or less alphabetical, because now we have Courtney and Sierra Bonds.
Okay, Courtney and Sarah Bonds. Come on up, get your test.
And Christiane Berg.
Christian Burke.
Audrey Clark.
Audrey Clark.
Camille Elta. Coletta's gone. Trevor Hayes.
Trevor.
Jerome Hazelrig. By the way, he was a 10-point gainer. That's not to sneeze
Oh,
at.
that's not Jerome Hazelray.
Sam Hector.
Sam Hector.
So Sophia Irvin.
Sophia Irvin.
Is that Sophia?
Gabe Kalis.
Grace Kalis.
Grace.
Nick Kiernan.
Nick Kiernan.
And Sister Patsy. Patsy Kiernan.
Patsy Kiernan. Patty.
Harley Myers. Another first-time camper with some point gain, not huge, but gain. Alex Pike. Stephen Pike.
Stephen Pike. See how there's Dad? He's gonna get his dad's hand-me-down. See that?
Angelica.
Angelica.
Gabriel or Gabriel?
Gabriel. Gabriel. Gabe. Where's Gabe? Madeline Rice. Megan Rokicki. Where's Megan?
Emily Rooney.
Emily Rooney, our lifeguard, who just said, I challenge
Lucas and then Michael Smith.
yourself. Lucas Smith. And then Michael Smith.
Chris Taylor.
Chris Taylor.
Peter Williams.
Peter Williams, first time camper.
I have a few left and a couple things I want to say. I just want to remind everybody, sometimes growing up and maybe especially in a homeschooling situation, you don't find it necessary to use your last name so much. But here and out in the world in general, and when you make job applications and stuff, if it says last name and first name, put them both on. It's just good business. I have two tests for Jillian Kalis. We weren't even sure whether she was a camper or a
well, she got
counselor.
a field commission. So, Jillian?
She did an extraordinary thing, and I hope she has a sense of humor. I'm going to mention it. She got an identical score on both tests, but the answers she gave were different. There are just a few others. Several people didn't catch the fact that there was a backside to one or the other of the pages. So some of these I'm just going to hand out. Actually, Emily only took the one. She didn't run into that problem. And Christina. Yep. And then
Emily.
I haven't sorted out the Ferretti papers, but if Gracie and Matt and Zach would come forward. There were some strange things that happened, and I don't want to bother everybody about all that. Anyway, so that, I can do that. Now, is there anybody that didn't get a test packet back? Oh, sorry. The tests, which don't work very well if you have them rolled up. But anyway, if you open to the backmost one first, that's your entry exam. So the score on that is the score that you walked in here with. or got as soon as you were here. And we can, yeah, okay, well, it's the same difference, because this was on the final thing, the same three. I think everybody that took the test realizes that the entrance evaluation and the first 3 pages of the exit evaluation were the same, so that we could just see if there was progress on those exact things. So I think you could just reply in unison with correct answers. And remember, on some of these it was specified to limit to 1 bubble filled in. On others it said all correct answers, or both, or whatever. So on the 18th of April, 1775, who made a famous ride? Paul Revere. The British were coming to steal from a Concord storehouse where patriots were keeping them until they were needed. And you had 2 choices, groceries and water, or arms and ammunition. Arms and ammunition, yes. Ethan Allen and his Green Mountain Boys, oh, I'm sorry, I filled that in automatically, captured Fort Ticonderoga without firing a shot on May 10, 1775. By the way, how many of you have seen Fort Ticonderoga? It is one of the most formidable places on earth, I think about approaching to invade. It's a star-shaped stone building rising out of the water and shore there. And these men paddled across in the dark, and as the mists are rising off the lake, they captured a sentry immediately and hushed him up, except to get him to direct them to where the commander was. And then they awakened the commander to demand the surrender of the fort. So the poor fellow comes to his barracks door in his, whatever he wears, nightshirt, I guess, would have been in style in those days. And he says, "In whose name?" before he opens. "In the name of the great Jehovah and the Continental Congress," Allen answered boldly. So it's a memorable thing, and everybody ought to be able to know about it and tell their kids and grandkids and so on. We may have to think creatively in some of those ways someday. Now, you notice there were 2 blanks there. So the first one is Green Mountain Boys, and you fill in that bubble. But he brought somebody with him that later was to cause some trouble. But on this event, he was helpful. So along with an egotistical friend, Benedict Arnold. What do you know of Benedict Arnold? I know Mr. Kraft knows. Anybody know or guess? Became a traitor, right? Yeah, tried to sell out to the Brits. Okay. Then they were able to haul many of the captured cannons back to Boston on sleds over the snow. And of course, they had to first get them across some water. I think they commandeered some flatboats while they were there, but not sure of all that. Then number 5, Patriot leaders, now known as Founding Fathers, included Sam Adams, John Hancock, Paul Revere, James Otis, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, Ben Franklin, and many more. So if you happen to have put Tories, just relearn that one. Just totally relearn. Those are Founding Fathers. Number 6, patriots organized into various groups for purposes of communication and resistance to what kind of tyranny? English, yes. We had prior trouble with the French, but that was long over. In fact, the French helped us in this situation. Number 7, historic flags from the founding era and war for independence include the Betsy Ross flag, several Don't Tread on Me or rattlesnake flags, and the Bennington flag, but not, which one? The Stars and Bars. That was a Confederate Civil War. It wasn't the main military one, but it was, it's the one that's famous now. Somebody, in fact, suggested that if we wanted to make a mint, that we come up here with a bunch of Confederate flags and go to some of these towns where they were so dedicated to wiping out the South and so on. Anyway, event number 8. Events associated with the War for Independence include the Boston Massacre, the Boston Tea Party, the Battle of Bunker Hill, the shot heard round the world, but not the incident at Harper's Ferry. No relation. Okay, page 3. This is a little change of subject now from the war to the establishment of the American government. How much legislative power is vested in a Congress of the United States? All. Okay. In other words, according to the Constitution, all legislative power is for Congress to take care of. Do they obey this nowadays? No. Who has taken, well, there's actually 2 other outfits that have taken huge amounts of liberty, well, huge amounts of deception, whatever with that. And of course, that's the Supreme Court and the executive. By the way, who can shoot out the numbers of the part in the judicial section of the Constitution, Article 3, that's a clue, that gives the Congress some responsibility in deciding what decisions are dealt with? Anybody remember? Pardon? Oh, no, it's specifically with the Supreme Court, reasonable try. But, so it's Article 3, Section 2, Paragraph 2, Sentence 2. So just think 3222, and that is the number for the job the Congress should be doing. They get themselves elected as being, for example, pro-life, and then they let stand that murderous idea that it's a right. Number 15, and this gets a little tricky and kind of long. The 3/5 clause in Article 1, Section 2 was a compromise by the Northern Free States to limit the representation in Congress of the Southern slave states, where, if slaves were fully counted, the Congress would have more votes for slavery than if they were counted as only 60% of the full population. So that is one of the correct answers there. The next one is ludicrous. I won't even dignify it by reading it aloud. The third one serves the same purpose, just another way of wording it. The 3/5 clause in Article 1, Section 2 served to establish the representation in Congress at a level acceptable to both Northern and Southern interests in the matter, based on the humanity of slaves, while increasing the taxation on them as being 2/5 or 40% property. So it's a rather, awful thought, but that's the kind of thing they had to deal with. We could never have had the whole country at that point if there weren't some kind of compromise. At least that's what they all tell us. I wasn't there, believe it or not. Okay, number 16. What is the meaning of enumerated powers? Powers specifically listed in the Constitution as belonging to the federal government or a branch of it. And then powers specifically mentioned or listed, especially those in Article 1. And again, the last one is somewhat silly and frivolous. The idea that they had to be written in red and numbered. Number 17, no state shall. Now, let me just ask you, how many of these are going to be correct?
All of them.
All of them, yes. It's an important part of the Constitution. It's Article 1, Section 10, and it lists these important things that no state shall do on its own. And that's enter into any treaty, alliance, or confederation, make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts. So of course, all states are in violation of this now. Pass any ex post facto law or law impairing the obligation of contracts, or grant any title of nobility. Number 18 has 2 correct answers, and it also has a clue following it. Abraham Lincoln was responsible for which of the following, with a reminder that he died April 15, 1865. When this was first put on a test, it was offered as an open book test, and it tells you in the book, I believe, that he couldn't have signed the 14th Amendment because it was passed after he was gone, like 1867 or 8, I think. So it was not the first bubble. He saved the Union and kept America, the USA, one nation. That's true, or that's a fill-in, it's a correct one. Then another one of these silly ones to relax people. He didn't design the luxurious Lincoln Town Car. And finally, he originated and signed the 13th Amendment outlawing slavery. And what was the original name of what he wrote first on that subject, do you know? That's just a, yes. Exactly, the Emancipation Proclamation. He proclaimed that all the slaves in the territory, in the states that had seceded were free. He was trying to undercut the ability of those southern states to use the slaves to fight for the independence of the South. It did not free any slaves held elsewhere. So, just a little sidelight. Okay, now that, remember, was not only the entrance exam, but the first 3 pages of the exit exam. And then the part that should have been labeled exit exam, because originally it was an alternate because I couldn't find on my computer or anywhere else at first the entrance exam we just went through. So I thought, uh-oh, got to start from scratch. And I had titled it that way and never thought of that when I applied it to being the second batch. This one is somewhat long because it's sort of a teaching test. So just skip down past the first couple paragraphs. To the mother country of those who settled in New England, bringing their laws, language, and customs with them was England. Yes. And surprisingly or not, people guessed in some instances, just missed the clues that were right there. So we had samples of each of the answers, but you've learned that one now. Number 2, the English people had a long history of working, petitioning, or fighting to maintain or restore rights and freedoms taken from them by overreaching kings. According to Chris Ann Hall, that should be a comma, these include how many of those does it include? All 3, yes. So the Council of 1100, the Magna Carta, either way, it's spelled either way, and the English Bill of Rights. Number 3, the resolution, again, clues here, for separating from England was first proposed in Congress in June of 1776 by Richard Henry Lee. Yes. Who was Tecumseh? Anybody know? He was an Indian who was organizing the tribes to fight us to protect their lands. He was an Indian hero, if you will, from their vantage point. But that's among the Eastern Indians. You hear mostly about the things that happened out west. Number 4, the Declaration of Independence was a letter to King George III of England in particular, and the world in general. It was written mainly by Thomas Jefferson. Everybody say it. It was written mainly by
Thomas Jefferson.
There you go. Who stated the purpose of the letter. the basic job of government, protecting the natural rights of its people, the duty of any people to deal with, fix or remove a bad government, and the particular violations of good government that King George had forced on the colonists. And there, as you have just said, it was Thomas Jefferson. Number 5, we're back to this again. The successful sneak attack by canoe on Fort Ticonderoga, which gave the colonists a hefty batch of new cannons, was conducted by A and his Green Mountain Boys, as well as a bright young, if overly ambitious officer, B. They first had to ferry the cannons across Lake Champlain and then drag them hundreds of miles to Boston on sleds. So what are the 2 names there that we need? Ethan Allen and Benedict Arnold, yes. Number 6, the opening gambit of the American War for Independence, also sometimes called the American Revolution. The shot heard round the world was fired on by Lexington Green during the early morning of April 19, 1775. And there again, I really tried to be generous on pointing the way to the right answer to that one. They weren't shooting around the moon then, let alone Mars. Number 7, battles are often named for the place where they're fought. Which of these places were known as sites of famous battles between the American Yankees and the English Redcoats? And which were? Saratoga, New York, and Bunker or Breed's Hill in Mass. Number 8, after the American victory at, where was the final American victory? Yorktown, which is in Virginia. The British finally surrendered unconditionally, and in November of 1781, a temporary treaty was made, the final one signed more than a year later. Number 11, the Constitution of the United States of America begins with a preamble, yes, something that walks before it. Next is Article 1, telling about the only part of the federal government that should make federal laws, the legislative branch of Congress, yes. And after that comes Article 2, that's pretty easy. The part about electing an executive and what that job is for. And then I reviewed that other little item, so you can read that on your own. So once again, you would have filled in all 3 bubbles. Number 12, Mr. McManus explained that war always leads to more government and a moral what? Decline, yes. Very important to realize, and especially when they start getting us into wars all over the place, only they aren't really wars because the Congress hasn't declared war and so on and so forth. Number 13, the word conspiracy means, which of these bubbles? To breathe together, yes. You've seen words like respiration, having to do with breathing, and inspiration, where you breathe in spiritual things, and so on. And of course, the prefix con often means with, not always. So conspiracy is to breathe together, and it requires 2 or more people and a degree of secrecy. And of course, you can have different degrees of secrecy. You can publish a magazine and do all sorts of things, and if the media, for whatever reason, don't mention it, most people will never see it, especially if it has a plain cover, and if the articles inside use a lot of 7-syllable words and generally don't seem to be getting anywhere if you're an ordinary reader. And I'm referring here to the Council on Foreign Relations and their magazine, Foreign Affairs. In Grand Rapids, it's on the shelf in at least one of the bookstores, but it's still secret for all practical purposes. unless they come to the American Opinion bookstore, and then, of course, they get the whole deal. Let's see. Where are we at now? What number are we on?
14.
Thank you. Congress has the power and duty to, based on,
Article 3, Section 2,
right. So there you have it in black and white. And reading that, you could have probably flipped around and gone back to anywhere else where such information might have been needed. Okay, 15. Article 4 of the Constitution has information about the relationship of the U.S. government to full faith and credit, yep. And that's of acts, records, and proceedings from one state to another. And, yes, the individual states and the states to each other. And that's why so many of these laws or false laws or criminal statutes or whatever are so important, because if one state passes something idiotic, other states may be induced to honor it. They may not, too, if people show some gumption. And then another thing, this would be found in Section 2 of Article 4, extradition of confused, I'm sorry, accused or convicted people from one state to another. And what is extradition?
Consent from one state to another. To send a criminal from like one state or one country to another at the request.
Okay,
of the state.
and the word extra often means outside of or beyond. So something that's extra good is beyond something that's good. So extradition has to do with saying they got to come out. All right, now the only thing left is for the benefit of anybody who might ever expect to be in an advanced class or anybody who has been, and that's this little thing, although there again, without having some of the same speakers, it might not be relevant. Are we doing okay on time? Okay. So the exit quiz, and these questions were mainly submitted by Mr. McGonigal on his class on the Communist Manifesto versus the law. And that's a very important and basic thing. The socialists had made such a bad name for themselves in Europe in 1848 that they thought they had to dream up a new word sounding more like community to promote their ugly beehive ideas. So they called theirs the Communist Manifesto. And to manifest something is to show it. You might manifest symptoms if you're coming down with chicken pox, for example. Or a ship's manifest is the thing that tells what's on board the ship as far as the freight and so on. So learning these words just helps you get around more things more easily. The Law is a very simple name for a book. How many of you own it or have read it? 2? Well, I know the folks back, other folks have. It's a little 80-page or so book, and very basic, very easy to read, and also somewhat inspiring in the sense that it refers to the taxation that involves basically stealing something from one group of people or one family or whatever and giving it to another. And he's very clear about that. He calls it legalized plunder, and plunder is an old word for theft, stealing, piracy, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so the Communist Manifesto versus the law is the topic of all these items. A definition of property given in the class is which of these?
Fruits of labor.
Say it again.
Fruits of labor.
Fruits of labor, yes. The labor itself is an activity, but the property is the resulting profit or the resulting building or the resulting garden or whatever. When you labor, you're putting yourself into something and taking ownership. That's if it's your own. If you're poaching, that's another matter, and we won't go there. At the end of the class, based on the evidence presented, Mr. McGonigal concluded that the principles or class struggle arguments of Marxism, socialism, communism are which? Everybody?
Mumbo jumbo.
Mumbo jumbo, yes. It's one of the most poorly written pieces of stuff that there is, I think. And it also has a very ugly idea of women as common property and so on. Okay. We have 5 minutes and 7 bubbles. So I took some liberties. I went up to this class and just tried to get down some of the gist of it. And because I hate writing falsehoods, I really wanted to put down things that you could recognize as being descriptive of what happened in that class. So, filling in all that apply, Dr. Kishori's story involves many people in a documented adventure in a state gone awry, hounding Dr. Kishore and causing many to, and then the next bubble, stay addicted to alcohol and drugs since his proven treatment is denied them in Massachusetts. And it includes high-handed bureaucratic enemies of freedom on one side and Camp Constitution's Hal Shurtleff and others he called angels on the side of freedom. So I drew that from some of the slides up there. The state of Massachusetts, through its minions, has chosen to harass, persecute, and even confiscate the fruits of his labor. So all of those were filled in. Now that's unusual. You know, statistically, test people normally follow certain patterns and all this, but I just thought it was good to give you something to take home that had that information in it. And I hope I didn't do any damage to the concept. Okay.